What if one wrong step in your land and construction financing could cost you $70, $80, $90,000? Or even worse, what if that wrong step in your financing could absolutely kill your dream? Most realtors will never talk to you about it because, let's be honest, they haven't done it, they haven't guided clients through it. And the hard part isn't going out and buying a piece of land. That's the easy part. Having a plan and building on it smartly, that's where things go sideways. And if this is potentially the last major move that you're going to make, don't you want everything to go absolutely as smoothly as possible? And here's just a perfect example of that. A couple of months ago, a guy reached out to me and he's like, hey, I bought 10 acres. I have no idea what to do with it now. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have any idea what it was going to cost to build on that land. He didn't have a lender. He bought the land cash. He didn't have a lender to go to. He was starting from ground zero. He saw a piece of property that he liked and he jumped on it, but he didn't know what he was going to do next. And the thing is, in talking to him, he's not alone. A lot of people make this mistake. And when you're going about it from that perspective, you're only one misstep away from a huge, huge financial screw up. So in this video, let's talk about what most realtors will not tell you and that you're only going to find out from somebody that's got experience in building houses, whether it's the ones that they've built for themselves or if it's ones that they've helped clients build. The thing is, building a home is not like going out and just buying a home in a neighborhood where you're only going to have one loan. If you're doing construction, you can have up to potentially 3 different loans. I mean, first of all, you might need a loan for the purchase of the land. You might need a loan for the construction of the property. In the end, you might need a loan for permanent financing, which is more like the traditional go to a neighborhood and buy a house. But the thing is, all of those loans have their own complexities. They have their own rules. They're good for their own timelines. They're complex in terms of their down payments, what the rates look like, how do you actually pull draws out or get money out of those loans. All of these parts of it, again, if you're not familiar with it, can be a huge pain in the butt. So if you've already approached a realtor on this for buying that land, and they're like, sure, we can help you buy a piece of property for you to build on, but they haven't had the deeper conversations around, hey, what are you going to do for your lending? Who is your lender? Are you going to do a one-time close or two-time close? Are you going to pay cash for your land up front? What are you going to do for your permanent mortgage? All of these things should be asked to you up front if the realtor knows what they're doing. If they're not, it is a major, major red flag. I'm going to suggest at that point that you go and you find a different realtor and have the conversations up front to find out what they actually know about building homes. And no, it's not like the realtor is going to actually be building the home with you, but understanding that process is absolutely paramount to going out and even looking for a piece of property to begin with. So let's start out with this. Let's start out with purchasing the land. Everybody thinks that, hey, let's go out and buy a piece of land. We'll figure out what to do with it after the fact. For right now, we like this land. Let's go ahead and buy it, and then we'll start the planning process. But I mean, you might be $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into a piece of property and then find out what you want to do with it can't actually be done. Guys, that is a massive, massive mistake and something that you can avoid. Again, you just have to have a little bit of prior planning to make sure that you don't make that mistake. And here's the reason behind that. What people don't tell you is that land loans are very, very risky to lenders. It's not like if you go again, buy a normal house or resale home or even a new construction home, and if you default on that and the lender's got to foreclose on you, okay, there's a hard asset on the ground. It's pretty easy to determine a price of that asset, and they can go and they can sell it. Even if they have to cut the price down a little bit, they know what that is. Well, land, it's a lot more difficult. You don't have a house on it. A lot of times there's not water, there's not electric, there is nothing there. So it becomes an extremely risky loan because if they have to foreclose, there's no guarantee that they're going to find somebody that loves the land as much as you did. So because it's such a risky thing for them, what the lender ends up doing, first of all, they're going to require a higher percentage down. A lot of times you're looking at 25 to maybe 30% down, just so if they do foreclose on you, there's a better chance of them getting their money back. The other thing is you're not going to be able to finance land over, 20 or 30-year period. Normally those loans are going to function a lot more like ARMs, or you might be able to get a 5-year term. Now you might be able to amortize it over 30 years or even 20 years, but you're only going to be able to get a 5-year term before they're going to make you have to refinance that thing. Again, they are going to want to make sure they can get that loan off the books as fast as possible. The other thing when you're going to a lender about it is they're not going to give you a prime interest rate. So in terms of being a riskier loan, Here's what you've got to understand from that lender's perspective. They're not going to give you a 30-year loan on this. It's going to most likely be a 5-year term rate. It's a little bit more like an ARM. That's how they function. Again, they want to reduce that timeline as much as possible. Also, because they're riskier, they're going to want 25 or 30% down for the most part, because again, if they have to foreclose on you and they've got to take that to the market at a reduced rate, they want to make sure that they get their money back. And if a piece of land does not have access, doesn't have a road, doesn't have utilities, doesn't have water, they're going to be even more stringent on that. They want some finite value on the open market so they know that if you default, they're going to be able to make their money back. And the last thing is, when we're talking about it, you're not going to be able to go out and get a prime rate on land like you would on a house. Most of the time, the rates are going to be at least 1 percentage point higher than what you're finding out on mortgages at that time. And again, this is because they're more risky. So if you're not having these conversations up front, if you don't know about this, you can get yourself into trouble and not really have a good way to get yourself out. So make sure you're having these conversations up front with that local team. And when I say local team, I always mean I'm a huge proponent of realtors. Obviously, I'm a realtor. Maybe you don't need it, but you've got to at least have a great lender, even if, guys, and hear me out on this, even if you're going to pay cash for the land, have a great lender, because you're going to have conversations after that if you're getting financing for the construction. The only way I wouldn't necessarily worry about a lender is if you're paying cash for the whole thing, but then your team becomes your contractor. Make sure you're getting in front of them early in the process to talk through these things and plan this out. If you don't have these resources, spend some time finding out, who do you contact? Who are those local people? I mean, if you're somewhere in Texas, obviously, I can help you out with all of that stuff. If you're outside of the state of Texas, I also have a lot of resources outside that I can guide you in the right direction. So if this is a dream, maybe it's a retirement property for you in Colorado or Wyoming or Utah or something like that. If you don't have those people on the ground, reach out to me. I can definitely help with it. All right, the next thing is, let's talk about your lender. First of all, when you're dealing with construction loans, you're dealing with land loans and things like that, you're not going to be going down to Chase Bank and Wells Fargo and CITI, Citibank. That's not where you're going to get your loans. You're not going to get your loan from Rocket Mortgage. That's not how it works. You're going to end up dealing with a lender who is local to that market. It's going to be more of a community bank, potentially a credit union in that area. But again, because these loans are more risky, the big companies like Wells Fargo, they don't touch them. That's not the box that they play in, so they're going to let that go. You're going to end up finding a local bank who does portfolio loans on construction and on purchase of land. And when you're dealing with that local lender, I mean, you may need to interview several, because unfortunately, I've worked with some lenders that don't really understand the process. You've got to find a lender that understands how do draws work, because you have to be able to pay your contractor along the way. And some lenders aren't real good at the draws. Some contractors don't like to work with them because they make it way too difficult to pull your money out. The next thing you want to know is, can your lender accurately calculate your interest-only payments along the way? Because if you were planning to have your construction done in 12 months, but you've got a couple of months in there where you're carrying more interest because nothing's being done, because something's held up with permitting or something like that, you need to know what those potential costs are up front, and to have a lender who can actually sit down with you and explain to you in plain English, hey, if you have to carry half of your construction loan being drawn out already over a long period of time, this is what your cost is going to look like. And then the other thing is being able to sit down with that lender and talk to them. Hey, are you going to be the one that I'm going to use to convert this into permanent financing, or do I have to go outside of you to find permanent financing at the end of the day? Again, these are conversations that a lender that's familiar with the process should be able to guide you through, no problem. But make note of them and write them down, because if your lender's not asking you these questions, A, I would get a different lender, but B, if you love this lender and you want to go to work with them anyway, you need to be able to ask them questions. Hey, explain this to me. I need to know how draws work. I need to know, what are my interest payments going to look like along the way? That's a conversation you've got to have up front. What you really, really want from your lender is, you need somebody that you can trust, somebody that's got your best interest in mind, not somebody that's just going to try to get this loan done so they can go to the next loan, so they can go to the next loan. The best lender is the one that, after you have this conversation, they sit you down and say, hey, would you be willing to look at this if I could save you $50,000 or $60,000? Because sometimes a one-time close is the right way to go about things. Sometimes a two-time close is the right way to go about things. Sometimes it pays to pay cash for the land. Sometimes it doesn't. You've got to have somebody who you can trust with that decision, who is looking out for your best interest. The next thing about the lender, and a lot of times they won't talk to you about this, is that draw process. And the next thing about lenders is the process of, taking out money, getting those draws. A lot of lenders won't really talk about this because they don't understand it, but If you can't get your money a reasonable timeline, that's going to put your entire timeline for the whole project at risk. I know lenders that you have to have inspectors come out, you have to have county inspectors, and then they have to have their own lending inspectors go out to make sure, hey, this was done, this was done, this was done, go ahead and release all that money. Okay, that's fine, and it seems like it's protecting you, but if it takes them 7 days to 10 days to schedule every one of those inspections, by the end of your project, that alone could put you 3 or 4 months outside of where your expected timeline was. On the other hand, there's lenders that, you as the homeowner, they will take your word for it. You can go out, you can take pictures, send it in and say, hey, foundation's done, go ahead and cut this check, and they'll cut the check. Or, hey, all the framing is done, it's dried in, go ahead and cut the check, and you take pictures. So understanding what lenders require from a draw perspective can really speed up your timeline. And then at the end of the day, what a good lender does, it's the same thing a good realtor does, it's the same thing a good builder does. They maintain communication, and they also manage stress, because if there's no communication, if you're not sure what's happening, if there's new requirements that pop up that you didn't know about, it's going to cause you stress, and that's what you don't want in a home construction process. You want this to be as stress-free as possible, because it's not going to be stress-free. And at the end of the day, if you've got a lender that's adding more stress by adding more requirements on top of it, by the time you get to the end of this process, you are just going to be fed up and absolutely exhausted. All right, the next thing is, let's talk about what equity in your land actually means, because there's a big difference between paying cash for your land and taking out a loan for your land. If you take out a loan for your land, when you start the construction process, if you're taking out a loan for the construction process also, you've had a closing on the land loan, and now you're going to have to refi that land loan into your construction loan, and your first draw is going to pay for that land. Okay, you're still going to be potentially 25 or 30% in for a down payment when you're doing that. But on the other hand, if you bought that land 5 or 10 years ago and you've got a lot of equity in it, or if you paid cash, sometimes lenders won't tell you, but what they should be able to do, and every lender that I know will do this, what you should be able to do is convert that equity in your land to your down payment for your construction loan. Case in point, let's say you bought a $200,000 piece of property for cash, and your total construction budget is going to be $1 million, okay, including your land. So you own that land, $200,000, that's 20% in already. If they're requiring 25% down, you've already got 20% there. You should only have to bring an additional 5% cash to the table when you close that construction loan. So make sure you understand exactly how that equity works in your land. Same thing, you may have bought that land 20 years ago, and it may have appreciated in value to a point where you can use that equity. So they're still going to have to pay off that land loan with your construction loan, but if there's enough equity in there for them to use 20-25% down, you've got to be able to do that. You got to make sure the lender gives you that opportunity. Now, moving on from the lender a little bit, let's talk about your builder. Obviously, your builder is super, super important, but a lot of people don't realize it's not just from a quality standpoint of the home. I've had builders that have amazing quality on homes, but they can end up blowing your budget. And it's really just as important to have an amazing builder on your side as it is a lender. Because at the end of the day, because if your builder has great quality, but they can't stick to a timeline, remember, once you get that construction loan going and those draws are being paid out, you're holding a note where you're paying interest on that loan. And if your timeline doubles, let's say it's from 12 months to 24 months because your builder can't stay on the correct timeline, maybe they can't keep subs on task, who knows? But if that happens, if your builder gets way off timeline, it is costing you money every month. So they can blow your budget simply by not being able to stick to a building timeline. The next thing with the builder is they've got to be able to communicate with your lender for those draws. And a lot of times if you find a lender first, and look, I'm always a proponent of finding a lender first, then a realtor, then a builder, and asking that lender and that realtor, especially in construction, especially in land purchase. Ask the lender and the agent, hey, who's a builder that I can trust, or who are 3 builders that I can trust out here? Because the lender's going to know if there's a builder that sticks to timelines, like I just mentioned, if they understand the draw process. At the end of the day, there are builders who will try to overdraw on the construction that they've already done because they may have financial obligations elsewhere. You need to know that up front. So again, if you're dealing with a reputable agent and a reputable lender in the area, they're going to be able to cost caution you for builders that you may not want to call for an interview. So again, the whole team kind of works together, but if you set it up in the correct sequence, you're going to save yourself a lot of headache in the end. And a lot like a lender, building a home is a stressful situation. A builder can make it better or they can make it worse. And you want the builder who's going to be able to communicate with you, manage those expectations, and say, hey, the lender we're working with has a 5-day draw schedule, and it takes them 5 days to cut checks, and I can't do anything until I get that money and pay my subs off. Okay, that's easy. That's communication. That will keep everybody happy because we understand what's happening at that point. But if you've got a builder that just disappears for 5 days at a time or 10 days at a time and there's no work being done and you don't know why, okay, that's stress. Find one that is going to keep your stress down, that's going to manage those expectations and keep everything, keep that timeline rolling. All right, we've talked about the importance of a great lender, talked about the importance of a great builder. Now let's talk about things that people underestimate. The first one of those is the permitting timeline. If you're building somewhere that is requiring a lot of permits, I'm going to say City of Austin, for example, you can still get lots in the City of Austin, but you got to have open communication with that builder. You got to have a builder who's experienced there, because I'm telling you right now, if you're trying to build a house in the City of Austin, you're not going to get permits for a minimum of 9 months. That can throw your builder's schedule way the heck off. I mean, if it's going to take 14 months to build and 9 months to get your permits, you're almost 2 years before you're getting into that house. So that's the first thing that most people underestimate. Make sure you know what permits are going to be required and then have a realistic idea of how long that time frame is. Out here in the county, you can get your permits to build in 6 weeks. You've got TCEQ permits, you may have well permits, and the county's got some hoops that you got to jump through just so they know what you're building, but it's 6 weeks versus 9 months. So understanding what that permitting process looks like is going to save you a lot of headache in the long run. The other thing that people tend to underestimate is site prep cost. And look, I'm a perfect example. When we built our house, I was out there with my builder, and I was like, oh yeah, it looks like there's about a foot of slope, maybe 2 feet on this entire length of the house. My builder just laughed. He looked, he goes, it's closer to 4 feet. And I was adamant that I was right. But again, even as much experience as I have, he had way more experience. And so I would have underestimated my site prep costs had I been doing it on my own. The site prep was actually about 30% more than what I was thinking. And then the other thing is people that don't want to build in contingencies. 10% contingencies, they're not a suggestion. I'm telling you, they're a real thing. You need to build that in. And I personally would always caution somebody, make sure you keep extra money at the end, because one of the most expensive parts of a house is the actual finish out of the inside. And I'm telling you, no matter how detailed you are with the architect and the builder, when you start walking around in your home as it's being completed and you're in the rooms and you're noticing the finish out, you're going to want to change things. You're going to want to add money into that house. You may have only been thinking about taking your backsplash up half the wall, but now when you see it, you're like, oh, that doesn't look right. So you want to take it the rest of the way up. In my case, when I saw the doors that we had initially decided we were going to put in, I hated them, and I wanted solid core doors throughout the house that looked a little bit different way. Each one of those doors cost another $125 over the previous doors. The windows, I didn't, when we were in, I didn't like the way the windows looked. My wife didn't like the way they looked. So we added casement all the way around the windows. Another price that went up. So as you're going through your house and you're seeing things, again, no matter how detailed you are from the beginning, you're always going to want to add other things. So make sure you're building in contingencies for that. Personally, I would say 15 to 20%. And the more expensive the house, the bigger that contingency is going to have to be. I mean, if you're talking a $2 million house, you better be building in 20%, because things at that rate are going to get really, really expensive if you're making changes. So the biggest bit of advice that I can give you on that standpoint is, from the beginning, slow the conversation down. If you go fast in the beginning, if you're really in a rush to find that land and to get started with the construction and all of that, as you're doing that, if you slow down and take that planning to the next level, you're going to end up saving yourself a lot of frustration, a lot of time in the long run on the back end of that thing. My biggest recommendation on that is slow down the conversation up front. From the planning stages. It's going to take you a long time to design your home. You're going to spend a lot of time with the architect. Spend just as much time talking through all of this process with your builder, with your lender, with your realtor, because if you take that time up front, it's kind of the motto, you got to go slow to go fast. That is exactly right here. If you take that time up front, the process is going to be a lot smoother. You're going to have fewer hiccups along the way. If you race through the beginnings and you don't have that attention to detail up front, the progress is going to be slow. The process is going to be long, and there's going to be a lot more frustration on the backside. If this feels like you're drinking from a fire hose, you're not alone. The good thing is that you stopped and you're trying to figure out and plan a little bit up front and try to learn from some people that have done this. And a lot of times that's not done. In fact, most people who are beginning this process that you're doing right now do not ever take the time to seek out somebody who may understand the process and who has some things to offer. And the thing is, you don't have to know everything. I don't know everything. I lean on my lender for things I don't know. I lean on my builders for things that they don't know. The lender leans on me for things that they don't know. You don't have to do this process on your own. I know a lot of times, especially if you're a guy, that's kind of what we want to do, right? We've got this dream in our head and we want to execute on it and we're going to do it ourselves and we don't need all this help. I'm telling you, I found out the hard way. And if you're a woman watching this, you're laughing right now because you know how guys are. I found out the hard way that I didn't have all those answers. And, again, when I was building my home, there were things that were caught for me by other people. So when you're going through this process, again, seek out help, especially on the things that you don't fully understand. Even if you're like, yeah, I think I know this, still reach out and try to find some help. And again, if you're doing this, doesn't matter where you're doing it. If you're in Texas, obviously I can help you directly. If you're in another state outside of Texas, I probably have resources that you can use. So if you don't have those local resources already, make sure you're reaching out and asking.